Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier sessions related to PGBP, we were discussing about some of the disallowances under section 40 small a. Let us continue the discussion on 40 series, which will have 40B also and 40 capital A and some other subsections and subclasses also. Let us go through those disallowances or allowances. Particularly, we can say allowances and disallowances are two sides of the same coin. If allowances are there, if that means any particular expenditure is allowed as deduction under any particular section with certain condition, automatically it also means if that condition is not satisfied, it is disallowed. Same way, if disallowance is there subject to certain condition, if that condition is not there, that means allowance is already there. So allowances or disallowances ultimately are two sides of the same coin. We have to just understand the essence of them rather than naming them separately. Ultimate objective is always the same. Whether a particular item of expenditure or a debit to P&L account is allowed as deduction or not. Yes or no. For that purpose, there were so many deductions which were given and provided specifically in section 30 to 36, and 37 gave a general deduction of all the expenses which are genuinely incurred during the previous year and revenue expenses, not personal expenses. Those are all eligible for deduction. Any type of expenditure is allowed as deduction under section 37. But the disallowances part is also equally important as the deductions part, because these will be the ones which we have to do adjustment in the main problems that we are going to encounter in this chapter. So that is why 40A talked about some of the items which were disallowed, and let us continue that discussion on disallowances under particular circumstances in today's session. Starting with 40B, which is related to the expenses which are deductible in case of a partnership firm. Once again, we are talking about disallowances, then why are we using the word deductible? Because both are two sides of same coin. When we say according to section 40B certain amounts are deductible subject to the conditions of 40B, that also means if those conditions are not satisfied, if any amount is there over and above that has been allowed under 40B, that will be disallowed. That also is inherent meaning of this. So once again, no need to go with these words, go with the essence of each of the provisions. That gives us more clarity about how to apply them in the questions when we face them. So let us start with section 40B, which is related to purely partnership firms. Only partnership firms, nothing else. No other SSE will have any implication of 40B at all. It is purely a partnership firm related provision. That is why an exclusive question can very well be asked from this. Because normally our SSE in our examination conditions will be individual. So 40B cannot be in general a provision that is applicable to a bigger question. So what happens? Possibly a smaller question can be asked either as MCQ or for a less number of marks, like 4 marks, like that. So 40B is another section in this chapter which has the capacity of being asked as a separate question. That is the importance of this section. Like this, section 32 was there already, depreciation can be asked as a separate question. 35 was asked earlier also as a separate question. Same way 40B can be also asked as a separate question. And other provisions, other sections what we have learned generally will be helpful in solving a normal bigger question of computation of PGBP. But these exclusive sections like 32, 35 or 40B are capable of being asked as a separate exclusive question also. That is why these provisions and these sections naturally will have their own importance in addition to the other provisions. Anyway, those will be useful for solving the regular routine questions of PGBP normally. So 40B is an exclusive section related to the partnership firms. So what 40B says? While computing the PGBP, the firm shall be allowed two special deductions over and above the normal other things anyway which are possible to be allowed as deduction under normal circumstances of computing PGBP. What are the two additional deductions or special deductions that a firm will be able to get? One is interest on loan to the partner or interest on capital to the partner or partners, whatever it is. Basically interest, which could be on the loan also or which could be on the capital also, which was provided by the partner to the partnership firm. Now interest is paid by the firm to the partner. So interest on loan to partner, people read like this, loan to partner. No, Baba. Firm is not giving loan to partner. Loan was given by a partner to the firm. Now the firm is paying interest on loan to partner. Where to give the gap while reading completely changes the meaning of any particular sentence or phrase. If you read it like interest on loan to partner, no, that is completely different. It is not interest on loan to partner. It is interest on loan to partner. Interest on the loan given or paid or payable to the partner by the partnership firm. That has to be understood very clearly like that. And same way, remuneration to the partner also can be allowed as deduction, of course, subject to conditions. If there are no conditions, 40B is not required. 40B is there for that only. Interest also, remuneration also, not allowed just like that. It is allowed subject to certain conditions. What are those conditions? Let us look at them one by one. First point is interest. What are the conditions? First thing first, the interest must be authorized by the partnership deed. For example, if there is no deed, that means no deduction, as simple as that. So the law says interest must be authorized by the partnership deed means, first of all, there should be deed. Then only there can be authorization of partnership deed related to interest. There is deed, but the deed is not talking about it. If the deed is silent, then the interest to partner shall be disallowed because the deed did not authorize it. So explicitly the deed has to authorize the interest, then only it shall be allowed as deduction. First point. And of course the payment must be related to a period after the partnership deed. In other words, suddenly you cannot enter into a partnership deed now and say that the partner will be eligible for interest on the capital retrospectively ranging from past 4 years, 5 years like that. No. Interest must be related to the period after the partnership deed is written, which is explicitly in writing. Partnership Act does not require a partnership deed to be in writing. Income tax also is not asking to have a partnership deed in writing. It is only telling if you have partnership deed, that too in writing, that too which authorizes the interest specifically, then only you claim deduction. No sir, I don't have partnership deed. No problem. Don't claim deduction. You will not get deduction. That's all. So once again, Income Tax Act is never prescriptive. It is reactive. It only tells what happens if you don't do something or do something. It will not tell what to do, what not to do in general. So here also it is the same. If they have the deed, that too in writing, that too which authorizes the interest to be paid to the partners on the loan or capital provided by them to the firm, then only such interest shall be allowed as deduction. That too related to the period after the partnership deed is entered into. There cannot be any deduction related to the interest prior to the actual partnership deed being executed. No retrospective changes are possible. Somebody cannot say, verbally we agreed already on interest 2 years back, but just now only we have entered into the partnership deed. We'll take interest for the period prior to the partnership deed also. Can they take? Of course they can take. There you cannot say no, they cannot take. We are not telling they can take or they cannot take. That is none of our business. They can take whatever they want to take. That is their firm. What we are to apply is Income Tax Act provisions. Income Tax is not telling them anything to do. Okay, if they take, that expenditure, which is an expenditure of the firm, is not allowed as deduction. That's what Income Tax Act is telling. So in order to claim deduction of interest on capital or interest on loan, these conditions have to be satisfied. There should be, first of all, a partnership deed. Interest should be related to a period after the partnership deed, and partnership deed should explicitly, specifically authorize that payment of interest. Then only deduction can be claimed under 40B. Another monetary deduction is also there, or condition is also there, which has to be also fulfilled. What if the interest is exceeding 12% per annum? Then that excess of 12% per annum is not allowed as deduction. For example, according to the deed, partners are eligible for 16% interest on their capital. Can they take it? Once again, the answer is, of course they can take it, that is their wish. But can they claim that as deduction? No, they cannot. They can only claim deduction up to 12% per annum, simple interest. Any interest paid by the firm over and above 12% per annum will be disallowed. Sometimes people will do mistake like this also. Partnership deed will provide 9% interest only. People will generously give 12% interest deduction. No, Baba. That is maximum 12%. Not that 12% has to be given to partners. Is the Income Tax Act telling the partnership firms to give 12% interest to the partners? No, that is a wrong observation and interpretation. Always we have to be careful in that. We are not telling anything what they have to do. It is only the limit that we are prescribing. We means the Income Tax Act is telling 12% is the maximum amount of interest per annum that can be paid to the partners for their capital or for their loans which they gave to the partnership firm. If the interest actually paid is more than 12%, then in excess of 12% is disallowed. Up to 12% it is allowed as deduction. But because of this, another question comes. Okay, let us say 16,000 rupees interest is paid to a partner as 16% interest on his capital of, let us say, 1 lakh rupees. That means 16,000 on his capital that he has provided 1 lakh, 16% means 16,000 rupees was paid by the firm to the partner. Let us take an example like that. As per this provision 40B, how much is allowed as deduction? Only 12,000 is allowed as deduction, 4,000 is disallowed for partnership firm. We are talking about firm here, not partner. But we have to also think about partner. He is also there, he is also an assessee in his individual capacity, right? What about the treatment in the hands of partner? Question comes. Will 16,000 be taxable, which he has actually received? Or will 12,000 be taxable, which was given as deduction to the firm under 40B? Logic once again. To be fair, would it be fair to make it 16,000 taxable? On one hand, you gave a deduction to the firm of 12,000 only, citing subsection 40B. On other hand, how can we make entire 16,000 taxable for the partner? That would not be fair. So, in other words, logics apart, the provision is whatever the amount that is claimed as deduction or allowed as deduction under 40B to the partnership firm, that much amount only will be taxable in the hands of the partner as an individual. But of course, under which head of income? PGBP. Interest also, remuneration also, that a partner receives from a partnership firm shall be taxable under PGBP, but not under income from other sources, not under the head of salaries. They are all taxable as PGBP. That's what has to be also kept in mind. That is the other side of it. But from the firm's point of view, these are the conditions to be met. Any interest in excess of 12% per annum simple interest will be disallowed for the partnership firm. That's it. That is about interest. Then coming to the remuneration, you call it whatever name. You call it salary, bonus, commission, remuneration, whatever the name you call it. Wages, any name you can call it. Doesn't matter, but remuneration is remuneration. That is payable by whom? Naturally the firm to the partner. Is it allowed as deduction? Of course it is allowed as deduction. But condition is what? That should be payable to a working partner. So if the question says there are 3 partners and in that one partner is working partner and other 2 are dormant partners or sleeping partners, and still remuneration is paid to them. For interest there is no such rule, because interest is not to the work that is done. That is for the amounts that the partners have contributed to the partnership firm in the form of capital or loan. That is different. When you talk about remuneration, that is for the performance of some duties, some work being done by one of the partners. So the firm is paying some remuneration to that person. And who should be that partner? He should be a working partner. Then only the eligibility of deduction is there. In other words, if the firm pays remuneration to a dormant partner or sleeping partner, that amount of remuneration shall not be allowed as deduction for the firm. That is one point. And of course, not only that, the partner has to be working partner. There are some other conditions also that have to be satisfied. What are those? Same things. First of all, there should be a partnership deed. There should be, deed itself means it should be in writing. And the share of profits must be specifically mentioned in the partnership deed. See, normally in the partnership, if for example the deed is silent about the share of profits, we assume that the profits are shared equally. We have actually nothing to do with profits now. We are talking about remuneration. But condition is that it is not about calculation. It is about a condition to be checked. What is the condition? First condition is the partner should be working partner. Then another condition is there should be a partnership deed first of all. And another condition is in the partnership deed the share of profit should be mentioned specifically. Because of that condition, is there any change in our calculation? No, it is not a calculation, it is a condition, that's all. We are not talking about share of profit, we are talking about remuneration. But still, in order to claim a deduction of remuneration paid to partner under 40B, the partnership firm should have a partnership deed in which the share of profit for the partners has to be mentioned specifically. That is a condition. And naturally, the remuneration should be authorized by the partnership deed. And also, as we discussed already, the partner should be a working partner, not a sleeping partner or dormant partner. These are the conditions to be satisfied for claiming deduction under 40B towards remuneration. Both are coming under 40B only. Interest is a different scenario, remuneration is a different scenario. But the law was not silent, it did not stop there. Then they further put some more conditions, like monetary limits have been kept by section 40B. The maximum of the limit for a remuneration is given below. Remuneration for all the partners put together. Don't think unnecessary assumptions. Per partner, nothing mentioned. Per month, nothing mentioned. Don't take those assumptions. When nothing is mentioned, we are talking about the entire remuneration that can be claimed as deduction by the partnership firm, which means that is for all partners. When nothing is mentioned, naturally we are talking about annual, not monthly. So, we don't have to bring certain assumptions unnecessarily to make ourselves confused and messed up. Not do that. Do not do that. Simple. Provision is simple. What is the limit for a remuneration that can be claimed as deduction under 40B? What is the limit? If the book profit is negative, the maximum amount of remuneration that can be claimed as deduction is 1,50,000 rupees. Once again, are we telling that the firms have to give 1,50,000 rupees remuneration to the partners? That is none of our business. They will give whatever remuneration they want to give. We are talking about deduction. How much can be claimed as deduction under 40B is maximum 1,50,000 when the book profit is negative. Then it is 1,50,000 maximum remuneration that can be deductible. On the other side, what if the book profit is positive? Means there is a profit. Book profit negative means loss. If the firm is incurring loss, still the firm can claim a deduction of 1,50,000 towards the remuneration that it gave to its partners in aggregate. On the other side, if the firm was having book profit positive, then the calculation has to be done carefully like this, very clearly. On the first 3 lakhs profit, on the first 3 lakhs, 90% of book profit or 1,50,000 rupees, whichever is higher. 90% of book profit or 1,50,000 rupees, whichever is higher. For example, a partnership firm has only 1 lakh rupee profit. So, 90% of that is 90,000. Is that the maximum remuneration available? No. 1,50,000, the minimum should be available. So, 1,50,000 will be the maximum remuneration in that case which is available, whichever is higher. On the other side, let us say if a firm has 2 lakhs book profit, 90% of that is 1,80,000. So 1,80,000 or 1,50,000, whichever is higher, 1,80,000 is allowed as deduction. Maximum, not minimum, not actual. Same way, imagine a firm has 2,50,000 book profit. Then 90% of that 2,25,000 can be allowed as deduction. So point here is on the first 3 lakhs profit, first 3 lakhs, 90% of book profit or 1,50,000 rupees, whichever is higher is allowed as deduction. On the balance of book profit, balance means over and above 3 lakhs of the book profit, 60% of the balance book profit is allowed as deduction. Once again, taking an example will be easier. A firm has paid 7,50,000 rupees as remuneration to its partners for the previous year 1920 in accordance with the partnership deed. Right? How much is the remuneration that is paid by the firm? 7,50,000. That is the amount of remuneration that is paid. Okay, fine. And book profit is already given, that is 10 lakhs. What is the remuneration allowable as deduction? For understanding purposes, and these type of questions can definitely be asked as MCQs. Quite possible. These type of questions. So how much will be the allowable deduction under 40B? First we have to look at book profit. Book profit of how much? 10 lakhs. On the first 3 lakhs, 90% is allowed as deduction because that is higher than 1.5 lakhs already. So 3 lakhs into 90% means 2.7 lakhs is allowed as deduction. On the remaining, over and above the 3 lakhs, that is how much? When the book profit is 10 lakhs, how much is over and above 3 lakhs? Naturally, 7 lakhs is over and above that. On that, 60% is only allowed as deduction, which comes to 4.2 lakhs. The total allowable deduction under 40B will be 6.9 lakhs only. But how much they paid? 7.5 lakhs. 7,50,000 they paid. Allowable deduction under 40B is only 6,90,000. That means 60,000 rupees will be disallowed. That is disallowed. So according to the question, you should be giving the answer. How much is allowed is the question. Answer is 6,90,000. If the question is about how much is allowed as deduction. If the question was asking how much was disallowed, then 60,000 would be the answer. That is the amount disallowed under section 40B, because the firm has actually paid over and above the limit prescribed by 40B. What was the limit here? If the book profit is negative 1,50,000, if the book profit is positive, on the first 3 lakhs, either 90% of book profit or 1,50,000, whichever is higher. Over and above that, whatever the book profit is there, on that 60% will be calculated. The total of these two will be the maximum remuneration that can be paid to the partner, that can be allowed as deduction under 40B. So naturally here a question comes, sir, what is book profit? Profit we know, but what is book profit? What is book profit? Here that means the PGBP, what we calculate as per Income Tax Act. Main point is after charging interest to the partners, but before allowing the remuneration to the partners. After charging interest, but before allowing remuneration, how much is the profit? That is book profit. And of course, if the firm actually pays any amount exceeding the above limit, that will be disallowed as deduction from the income of the partnership firm. But main point here is also to identify what is book profit. If it is given in the question, no problem. If not given, we should be able to calculate book profit by taking the following steps. First, we have to find out the net profit of the firm as per P&L account, which will be given. P&L account has to be given and profit of the firm has to be taken. Then we have to do the adjustments. All the adjustments related to whatever 28 to 44 dB means the entire PGBP adjustments, whatever sections that we are going to study, all of them will have to be adjusted, including the interest on the partner's capital. That is why this book profit is calculated after charging interest to the partner. Imagine if already interest to the partners is debited to the P&L and that is allowed by 40B, then there is no adjustment required. But if the interest on partners debited to the P&L is more than what is allowed under 40B, that means there is some amount that is disallowed. Then naturally, the disallowed amount of interest has to be added back as an adjustment. So, when we already take profit as per profit and loss account, it would have been already after charging interest, after charging remuneration. But what we want profits after charging interest but before charging remuneration. So if interest was charged according to 40B or below that, there is no problem. If interest was already charged to P&L over and above the limits prescribed in 40B, the disallowance has to be adjusted by adding it to the profit as per P&L account. And also other adjustments have to be anyway done. In addition to that, we have to add the remuneration to the partner to these profits if already debited to the P&L account. All these ifs have to be carefully observed because we have to apply the provision basically. The provision has to be very clear. What is book profit? Book profit is the profit on PGBP basically calculated as per Income Tax Act after charging the interest to the partners but before allowing the remuneration to the partners. That is the definition. That is the purpose. If already interest was debited, then there is no problem. If it is below the limits of 40B, if already remuneration was debited to P&L, that should be added back because we need book profit before charging that remuneration. So add that remuneration also. But look at one more additional point here, which is also important in some of the special cases. You have to also subtract unabsorbed depreciation, but should not subtract the brought forward business losses. We cannot adjust the brought forward business losses, but we can subtract the unabsorbed depreciation which was brought forward from earlier years. So that is another twist point here. If that is given in the question, you have to be careful. While calculating book profit, you should subtract unabsorbed depreciation but not unabsorbed business loss. Whatever the resultant is there after following these 4 steps, that figure is called book profit. Of course, there is another care that has to be taken. Due to the subtraction of unabsorbed depreciation, the residual profit should not be less than the brought forward losses which are supposed to be set off in the current year. So unabsorbed depreciation has to be reduced from the profits already what are calculated in step 1, 2, 3 only to the extent where the resultant residual profit should not become less than the brought forward losses. So to the maximum amount we are equal to the brought forward losses only, the unabsorbed depreciation can be adjusted. That is one more special twist point. Not that important, but yes, sometimes very keen observations and keen points, small points also will be asked in exams. That is why we cannot neglect them. So book profit, simply speaking, is nothing but a profit calculated as per P&L account. Do the adjustments according to all the sections of PGBP, and interest, if it is allowed already and debited to the P&L already according to 40B, there is nothing to be adjusted. If interest is debited to P&L over and above 40B, then that excess amount, that is disallowance amount, has to be added back. Remuneration, if already debited to P&L, has to be also added back. Unabsorbed depreciation also has to be subtracted, but not the brought forward losses. However, care has to be taken while subtracting unabsorbed depreciation. The resultant after the deduction or after the subtraction of unabsorbed depreciation should not be less than the brought forward business losses themselves. That is another special point to be noted while calculating book profits for partnership firms under 40B for the purpose of calculating remuneration allowable to them in the sense allowable to the firm as deduction. Let us apply this provision in one more situation. Rao and Jain, a partnership firm consisting of 2 partners, reports a net profit of 7 lakhs. This is 7 lakhs before deduction of the following items. You have to read that carefully. Before deduction of the following items, the net profit was 7 lakhs. Point number 1 says salary of 20,000 each per month payable to the 2 working partners of the firm as authorized by the deed of partnership. There are 2 partners and both are working partners. That's okay, no problem. That means as far as conditions are concerned, they are all satisfied because the salary or remuneration is authorized, there is a deed of partnership, so no problem in that. But whether it is satisfying 40B or not, that we have to look at. Then, should we deduct this from 7 lakhs? No. Why? Because when we calculate book profit, we have to charge or deduct when it is, if it is already not deducted, that is why. Deduct, add people, if you take blindly, then it is going to be the biggest danger in this chapter. Each question could be different. According to the information, we have to act. In this question, it says 7 lakhs profit is there, but that is before deduction of the following items. Means these items are not already debited to P&L. If they are not already debited to P&L, we have to debit them or we have to deduct them. But should we deduct salary also, remuneration also? No, because book profit is something which has to be calculated after charging the interest but before charging remuneration. So we cannot charge remuneration. First point, should not be deducted from 7 lakhs for purpose of calculating book profits. But second point has to be deducted definitely because depreciation is deductible under section 32. That is okay. Then third point, how much is deductible? We have to look at that. Interest on capital at the rate of 15% per annum as per the deed of partnership. Amount eligible for interest, capital, not interest. Amount of capital eligible for interest is 5 lakhs rupees. He has mentioned 5 lakhs rupees, that's all. That is not mentioned as per person or something. We don't have to assume unnecessary things. Amount of capital eligible for interest is said. Is it related to one partner or two partners? It is not mentioned. So it should be for two partners only, for the firm as a whole, naturally. So 5 lakhs into 12% only will be eligible, as we know. But the remaining 3% is not eligible. If it was already debited, then we would have added the disallowance portion only. But this was not already debited. As per question, this 7 lakhs profit was before the deduction of following items. So what we have to do to calculate book profit? First we have to take 7 lakhs rupees profit, whichever is there, before the deduction of certain items. Remuneration we should not deduct, but we should deduct depreciation, which is allowed as deduction very much under section 32. So 1,50,000 should be deducted. And also we should deduct interest to the extent allowed by 40B. That comes to how much? 5 lakhs into 12% only is allowed, which means 60,000 is allowed as deduction. That means how much is book profit? According to this calculation, how much is book profit? That was question number 1. Compute book profit. So 7 lakhs minus 1,50,000 minus 60,000. That comes to 4,90,000 book profit. 4,90,000 book profit. Then second question is asking allowable working partner salary for the assessment year 2021 as per 40B. That can be calculated directly. 4,90,000. In that, first 3 lakhs. First 3 lakhs, how much will be eligible? 90%. That means 2,70,000 or 1,50,000, whichever is higher. Naturally, 2,70,000 will be higher. Remaining over and above 3 lakhs book profit, that is 1,90,000 into 60%. That means 1,14,000 is the maximum amount that can be eligible under 40B of the Income Tax Act. How much that comes out to be? 2,70,000 plus 1,14,000, that comes out to be 3,84,000. What students will write? Answer for question number 2 is 3,84,000 and will get 0 marks. If we don't check exactly whether salary was already higher than this or lower than this, that we have to check first. Directly, blindly, you cannot say 3,84,000 is eligible. No. What if the actual salary was less than this? Then 3,84,000 would not be eligible. Imagine in the case of, instead of 20,000, 10,000 was given as salary. Then, if you write 3,84,000 as deductible amount under 40B, that would be wrong. So be careful. Don't directly say that it is eligible for deduction. First check how much is the salary that was paid to each of the partners. 20,000 each, he said, each per month. So 20,000 into 12 into 2. That means they are going to pay 4,80,000 as the total salary, which is higher than what is prescribed by 40B. After checking that only, we have to conclude that the final answer is 3,84,000, which is the answer for question number 2. So allowable working partner salary is how much now? Only 3,84,000. That's all. That is the answer for this question, which was also there in ICA material. Then let us apply this in some of the cases of interest. Each of them can be a bit. Let us take some examples for understanding. Case A. Interest on capital as per books of accounts is 20,000. Rate of interest allowed to partner is 10%. As per partnership deed is also 10%. Will there be any disallowed amount? No, there is no disallowed amount. So it is nil. Because all are okay. It is not exceeding 12%. It is amount authorized by partnership deed. Well, as long as it is not exceeding 12% and authorized by partnership deed, there is no disallowance. Then case B. Interest on capital as per books of accounts is 30,000, which was on the basis of 15%, whereas deed said only 12%, whatever it is. Over and above 12% has to be disallowed. If 30,000 is representing 15%, how much will be the disallowed amount of 3%? That will be 6,000 rupees disallowance. That is another case. Each of them can be a bit. MCQs. Then 30,000 is the amount that is debited in the books of accounts of the firm. 15% is the rate of interest that is allowed to the partner, and the deed is silent. See, when the deed is silent, entire amount is disallowed. Entire amount is disallowed because no allowance of 40B is there when the deed is silent. Deed has to be specifically mentioning something. That's okay. It may be matching with actual or not, that doesn't matter, but deed has to tell something. So when deed is silent, entire amount is disallowed. Then case D. Amount of interest is 30,000. It was allowed at the rate of 20%, whereas interest allowed in partnership deed is only 18%. It doesn't matter. As far as 40B is concerned, anything in excess of 12% shall become disallowed. So 30,000, if it is representing 20, excess of 12% is 8. So 1500 into 8, that will be 12,000 disallowance in case D. Do these calculations. Case E, same 30,000, rate here is 15%, deed allowed only 10%. So here look at this variety situation. When we have 30,000, that is representing 15, deed allowed only 10%. So we cannot apply the 12% rule here. Deed allowed only 10% means anything cannot be more than 10%. 12% is maximum as prescribed by 40B. But if the deed itself says 10%, it cannot exceed 10%. So that means 5% has to be disallowed, which means 10,000 has to be disallowed. Then case F, 30,000 same, this is 30%, 30%. That means more than 12% is 18% to be disallowed. So 30,000 divided by 30 into 18. Naturally, 18,000 will be disallowed in this case. That is another example for understanding of 40B, particularly related to interest. 40B is all about two things. One is interest and one is remuneration. Both the provisions are very clear in 40B. We have to apply them according to the information that is given in the question. Then another example can also be taken. In other case, A, B, C are partners in ABC and company. Interest on capital allowed is 16% to A, B and C. And how to treat that in the hands of A, B and C. Of course, 16% is not allowed as per 40B because amount is not, the details are not given. We can assume that it is approved by the partnership deed. If 16% is represented by 16,000, how much is disallowed? 4% is disallowed. That means 4% will be how much? That will be 4,000 rupees. That is disallowed. Allowed is 12,000. Disallowed is 4,000 out of this 16,000. Same way for B. 8,000 is representing 16%. 12% is only allowed means 6,000 allowed, 2,000 disallowed. 32,000 for C. Representing 16% means 24,000 allowed, which is at the rate of 12%. In excess of that, 8,000 is disallowed. And main point here is how much will be the income of the partner. It will be same which was allowed as deduction to the partnership firm. That has to be understood. For example, partner B has received 8,000, but 8,000 is not taxable. Only 6,000 becomes taxable in the hands of the partner, that too as PGBP, because that is the same amount which was allowed to the firm as reduction under 40B. That is the point to be noted in that example. Let us take another situation of, say, an example where ABC or partners in ABC and company sustained a loss of 2 lakhs. See, whatever the loss is, amount doesn't matter. When it is 2 lakhs, whatever 5 lakhs, 45 lakhs, maximum amount that can be allowed as deduction for remuneration is 1,50,000 rupees only. That's it. So the remuneration paid was 175, 1,50,000, which is more, right? Since maximum remuneration to the firm which can be claimed as deduction by the firm is only 1,50,000, how each partner will get taxable remuneration in their hands? For the firm it is okay, it does not matter whether it is A, B, C. Put together 1,50,000 is what is deductible for the firm as a whole, but the same amount should become taxable on the other side of the coin, that is for the partner, right? How much will be taxable for A, how much will be taxable for B and C? That will have to be just apportioned in accordance with the remuneration what they have received. That is 75, 1 lakh and 50,000. That's all. So this 1,50,000 is apportioned like this: 75,000 by 2 lakhs 25,000, 1 lakh by 2 lakhs 25,000, 50,000 by 2 lakhs 25,000. So the taxable remuneration individually for each partner will be according to the ratio of their remuneration. This is also an important question, kind of MCQ can be asked. Only he will ask what is the amount of, entire details will be given. ABC, all these things will be given. How much remuneration is given to all of them will be given. But you will ask one simple question: how much is the amount of remuneration taxable in the hands of B? Only for B, how do you calculate? You cannot say 1 lakh is taxable. No, it is not. Because the firm could not get a total deduction of 2,25,000, it could get a deduction of only 1,50,000. Taxability also in the hands of partners should be total 1,50,000. Total 1,50,000, okay, but individually how much? Just apportion it in the ratio of whatever the remunerations are. Then for B, how much it will come to be? 66,667 will be the answer. That will not come directly. You have to calculate that by using this ratio of remunerations as per this example. That is about section 40 small b related to the partnership form. Very, very important section, as I already told. Why is it important? Not for a bigger question, particularly for MCQs it is very important. Also for a separate special question to be asked from that also it can be very important. So 40b is about partnership forms. Now let us continue with some more disallowances. One of them is any payments to relatives, or let us call it related person. Relative is not just the word. We can say related person. If any payment is made to a related person, and what kind of payment is made? Excessive payment is made. In other words, normally, according to the fair value of any particular product or service, certain amount is supposed to be paid. But the SSC has paid excessive amounts to the related person. That excessive amount shall be disallowed to the extent it is unreasonable. As per whom? Not you and me. As per assessing officer. So once again, there is no much of our role in this section 48.2. What is unreasonable, what is reasonable, you and I cannot decide. If the details are given in the question, then it's okay. Imagine question says a particular commodity was supposed to be having a fair value of 10,000 rupees. But what the SC has done, he has given 40,000 rupees to his, let us say, brother, related person. Okay? And he debited P&L with 40,000 because that was his expenditure. So what he is trying to do intentionally and unnecessarily, he is trying to inflate his expenses by giving some money to the related parties. Of course, that is only for showing them in the books of accounts. To show that the expenses are higher, such unscrupulous practices may be adopted by some people. To avoid that, 48.2 has been introduced, wherein in this particular case 30,000 rupees should be disallowed because that is the excessive amount. Whatever is the fair value of that commodity, that should be only allowed. In addition to that, whatever the excessive amount that is paid to a related person, that excessive amount shall be disallowed. Of course, in the exams, these details have to be given. If these details are given, then we can disallow 30,000 rupees in this particular case. But of course, as a reality, it will not be done by the SSC himself. It will be done by assessing officer. If the assessing officer feels there is any unreasonable amount which is paid by the SSC to his own relatives or related parties, then assessing officer can disallow not the entire amount, only the excessive amount. That is the section of 40A2. And then there is a separate definition or meaning of related person. Who is a related person? There is a huge list that is given for individual, for a company, for a firm, for AOP, HUF, for any other SSC. But we have to just understand the logic of this. You don't need to by heart all of that. Logic, if you understand the thread, we can easily identify who is a related person. Generally, for an individual, who is a related person? Relatives are related persons. Then question comes, who is a relative? That is given also in the law. Who is a relative according to this? Spouse, brother or sister, not cousins, brother or sister, lineal ascendant or descendant of the individual. That means parents, grandparents are lineal ascendants, etc. Children, grandchildren are lineal descendants. So, that is the meaning of relative. If any excessive amount is paid to them, that excessive amount shall be disallowed by the assessing officer. What is relative? Spouse, brother or sister, siblings, or any other lineal ascendant or descendant of the individual are called relative here. That's all. Nobody else. So, questions will be given like the SSC has paid some amount to his brother-in-law and all that. That's okay. There is no 40A2. You have to understand that. So, for an individual SSC related person means his relatives, or not only relatives, any other person in whose business or profession the individual has substantial interest. So, let us say this individual has a substantial interest in X Limited. Then X Limited becomes a related person to that individual. Then what is substantial interest? We already should know that. Substantial interest means anybody, any person having at any point of time during the previous year, if he is a beneficial owner of the equity shares carrying not less than 20% of the voting power or 20% of the share of profits in other cases other than companies, then that is called as a person having substantial interest, not less than 20%. So, if it is 20% also, that means he is having substantial interest. So, exactly 20% or more, if anybody has share in the equity shares or share of profits, whatever it is, then such person is said to have a substantial interest. So, for an individual, if he is having a substantial interest in any other company, this company becomes a related person to the individual naturally, like that. So, in general, for our SSCs, because they are individuals, this should be enough. But others also you can logically understand. Don't need to by heart it. If you try to by heart it, it will be unnecessarily too much cumbersome, not required also. You can just understand and apply the logic. Logic is basically two, where substantial interest is there or where the person is relative. Now, just for understanding, for company, who will be a related person? Director or any relative of the director or any person in whose business or profession the company or the director or the relative have substantial interest. Same way, for a firm, partner is related person, relative of partner is related person, or any other business in which the partner or relative of such partner has substantial interest, or the firm itself has substantial interest, that is also related person. Same logic applies to AOP also, HUF also, etc. So the point is, in case of HUF, every member or relative of such member also is called as related person. So this all other things are not that much important. You have to keep in mind the logic of it. In case of company, director, not only director, the relatives of director also, and not only that, any other organization in which the company or director or relative have substantial interest. For a firm, partner is related person definitely, not just partner, relatives of partners also, and not just that, In any other organization in which the firm or partner or relatives of the partner have substantial interest. Same with AOP. HUF is little different. Member, where member is definitely related person. Relatives of such member also is related person. Or any other organization in whose business the HUF or members or relatives of such member has substantial interest. So what is changing here? Depending upon the nature of the organization, the name is changing. The logic is not changing. In case of company, director and co, other things. They're related persons. Firm, partner and co. I means other gang. AOP, member and co. HUF, member and co. That's all. That is what it is. So if you remember, for individual, all others are easy. Remember, individual, what is for an individual SSE, who can be called as a person who is related to that SSE, all his relatives, or any person in whose business or profession the individual has substantial interest. That is called a related person. And if any excessive amount is paid to a related person, such excessive amount shall be disallowed to the extent it is unreasonable as per the assessing officer. That is 40A2. We can call it excessive payments to related parties for understanding purposes. Then 40A3, naturally we are all talking disallowances series. This is also a disallowance. 40 capital A, this is not small a, that care has to be taken. Here also 40A2 is capital A. Earlier what we discussed, 40A, that was small a. Why is that and all? We don't know. The lawmakers made like that, we have to write like that. So 40A3, this A is capital A. Then what is this one? This is also something which we already used in many cases, but now we are talking about the normal revenue expenditure also. Any amount of expenditure exceeding 10,000 rupees, if it is paid to one person in a single day, otherwise than by way of account pay check or account pay draft or by use of electronic system through bank account, shall be completely disallowed. Completely. Let us say somebody has paid 15,000 rupees to one person on a single day by cash. Entire 15,000 shall be disallowed, not 5,000. This 10,000 is not some calculational point, it is also only a condition. If any amount is paid by cash more than 10,000 to a person on a single day, entire amount shall be completely disallowed. That's a very important point under section 40A3, which we applied earlier also, if you remember. But that was for capital expenditure, particularly like if amount of more than 10,000 is paid for acquisition of an asset, then it would not be added to the actual cost of asset. Same way, amount of more than 10,000 is paid for capital expenditure of specified business, then that would not be considered as eligible for deduction under section 35 AD. That was there earlier, but that was for capital expenditure. Now what are we talking about in 48.3 is normal revenue expenditure, which is business expenditure. If it is paid by the SSE on one single day to one single person more than 10,000 rupees, in excess of 10,000 rupees. So 10,000 rupees exactly paid, no problem, sir. In excess of 10,000 rupees. Each word is important, that is why. In excess of 10,000 rupees, if it is paid, the entire amount becomes completely disallowed. That is one point. And another situation might arise where, let us say, already in the earlier years, on due basis, the SC has already claimed deduction for that expenditure. Deduction can be claimed on due basis also, repayment basis also, because SC has the option of following the cash system of accounting or mercantile system of accounting. Let us say SC is following mercantile system of accounting and already he has debited his P&L last year, though he did not pay anything, but he claimed a deduction on due basis. Now in this year, current year, he has made the actual payment. That too same, in excess of 10,000 to a person, in a same person in a single day. Then what should we do? We already allowed it as deduction earlier. Now what we should do, naturally, when the situation is reversed, that should be deemed as income of the subsequent year. That means now when the real payment is made. So disallowed means when, if the payment also made in the same year, expenditure also incurred in the same year. On the other side, if actual expenditure was incurred earlier, let us say in prior to the previous year, some past year actual expenditure was incurred, debited to P&L, but now payment made then. So it was allowed as deduction on accrual basis earlier. Now when the time has come to make the payment, we paid it by cash, more than 10,000. No, not allowed. Because of that, what we should say now? We cannot say we will disallow it now. What is there to disallow? There is no expenditure debited now. Already it was debited long back. Now what is the treatment for it? Reverse the debit, means credit it. In other words, that will be treated as income of this year in which the payment is made in excess of 10,000 rupees. That is very important provision of 48.3. 48.2 was excessive payments made to relatives which are disallowed. 48.3 is payments exceeding 10,000 rupees in cash, simply speaking. Banking channels is okay. But account to payee check or draft is allowed. Other checks like bearer check, bearer draft, no. Order check, order draft, no. Underco check, no. Like this, any other types of variety checks are not allowed here. Simply what is allowed by law is account payee check. That only. Other than that, electronic system of banking is okay. That is absolutely okay. So what about debit card, credit card? No problem. That is okay. That is banking channel only. That is not an issue. But not by cash, not by bearer checks, etc. That is the restriction on cash payments by SSEs under section 48.3. But along with this restriction and strictness, similarly and simultaneously, the law has made some exceptions. Section 48.3 made the restriction. Rule 6DD has given exceptions. Exceptions means what? Exception to this 48.3 means what? In the following cases, even if the amount paid by the SSE is more than 10,000 rupees also, there is no problem. That means there is no disallowance in the following cases. That is why there are exceptions. What are those? You can logically understand why also for each of them. Payments made to RBI. We are making payment to RBI. We can make payment, any payment, no problem. More than 10,000. Or a commercial bank. Public sector, private sector, doesn't matter. Cooperative bank. Or land mortgage bank. Primary credit or agricultural societies. Payment made to LIC. Payment made to central government or state government. Payments to cultivator. This is important. Cultivator means the one who is growing any agricultural produce, or grower or producer in respect of agriculture or forest produce or products. So the point is, if any sugar factory is paying money to the growers of sugarcane, the farmers of sugarcane, in cash in excess of 10,000 rupees also, it is okay. So they pay in cash only. That is not a problem. That is allowed as deduction. That is the reason why, to stop such unscrupulous practices of paying cash lesser, taking from them vouchers higher, earlier we have seen a provision wherein under section 36 the deduction was allowed only to the extent of amount which was decided as a price by the government was allowed for particularly sugar cooperative societies, not for companies and all. So that is one more point, but anyway, that has no direct link with this. These payments are all normally, naturally, what we are talking about, payment to bank. Or payment to bank, there is no problem. You are already paying to bank only, no? So that is not an issue. They can be paid in excess of 10,000 also. And payment to farmers or payment to purchase forest produce can be made in cash, excess of 10,000 also. It is an exception to the general rule of 48.3. Then, second exception, payments made for the purchase of products manufactured and processed without the aid of power in a cottage industry. So something like handicrafts and all, they can be purchased by paying them in cash. So for example, all this Kanchipuram saris and all, weavers who are doing mostly without the aid of power. Without the aid of power does not mean their homes do not have power, or televisions or bulbs or fans, but the actual weaving exercise is happening without the aid of power. If it is happening like that, then handmade, handlooms we can call it, handicrafts we can call them. Purchase of those goods can be made by paying cash also, even if it exceeds 10,000, there is no problem. Then third point, very important point, payment made for plying, hiring or leasing goods carriages Goods carriages means basically trucks or goods autos, whatever. Goods carriages, not necessarily lorries. Lorries also goods carriages. They can be small things also, Tata, whatever. Different small trucks, mini trucks will be there, DCMs will be there, whatever they are, we don't care. Goods carriages is what we should remember. That means, simply speaking, payment made to a transporter. Then payments can be made in cash up to 35,000 instead of 10,000. So that is the difference here. That means if you want to transport goods in a goods carriage from one place to another place, and if you paid 35,000 in cash also to that transporter in one day, there is no problem. Then the limit is raised from 10,000 to 35,000 for payments to transporters. This is where people will once again do mistakes. It is not a payment by transporter. It is payment to transporter. Keep that in mind. Same way, retirement benefits like gratuity, retrenchment compensation, etc., not exceeding 50,000 rupees. They can be made in cash also. That is another exception. This is a variety exception. Payment required to be made on a day on which the banks were closed on account of a holiday or strike. So, loophole actually. When bank is having holiday, on that day only you had to make a payment. So, you made a payment only on that day in cash. There is no problem. So, people can tell that as an excuse. That day banks were closed because of holiday or strike, whatever. Some more comedy things are there. Payments made by a person to his agent who is required to make a payment in cash for goods or services on behalf of such person. So I am not making cash payment directly. I am making payment to a person to my agent, but my agent is required to make a payment in cash only. So I have no option. I had to pay him in cash. I can say that. That is another exception. Exception itself means it's a loophole by itself automatically. Some of them are genuine. Some of them will give little bit of excuses to the people to avoid the disallowance under 48(3). We can't help it. Law is law, rule is rule. We have to just follow that. Then, payment made by an authorized dealer or money changer against the purchase of foreign currency or traveler's check in the normal course of business. How can that be expenditure, first of all? He is only exchanging, no? He is taking Indian currency or giving foreign currency, or vice versa. He is taking foreign currency and giving Indian currency. Whatever he is doing, he is an authorized money dealer or money changer. Then he will pay more than 10,000 does not mean that should be disallowed. First of all, it is not even an expenditure. So that logic itself is not required. But still they made it as an exception, so we just know it. Same way, if payments are made to an employee after deducting TDS, and that employee is temporarily posted for a continuous period of 15 days or more in a place other than his normal place of duty, or he is on a ship. So employee is on a ship or is placed at a place where he is not normally doing his duty. That means he is basically going for a trip or a temporary posting somewhere else. There you cannot expect him to have all banking facilities and all. So payment can be made by cash also. And he does not maintain any account in any bank at such place or ship. If he doesn't have an account there, then also payments can be made in cash. So the point is that also can be very much exploited. You may say that my employee is not having bank account. In that place where there is a job for him, like a ship or a place where he has been temporarily posted for a period of 15 days or more, which is not his normal place of posting or normal place of duty. If that is the case also, exception under rule 6DD will be applicable. This rule number you have to remember, 6DD. You have to remember this rule number, because definitely in the questions there will be application of 48(3) also, for sure. And there will be an application of 6DD also for sure, where you have to refer to this rule. Don't say section 6DD, it is rule 6DD. Rule is rule, section is section, both are not same. Sections are in the act. Rules are in the rules separately. Income Tax Act 1961 is different. Income Tax Rules 1962 is different. So, Rule 6DD gives the exceptions here. Simply speaking, payments to banks or other institutions is okay, more than 10,000. Payment to cultivators, farmers is okay. Agriculture or forest produce, that's not a problem. Payment to purchase handicrafts, handlooms, etc. is okay. even if it is more than 10,000. Payment to a transporter can be made up to 35,000 instead of 10,000. No problem in that. If retirement benefits are paid, up to 50,000 cash can be paid, no problem. Then, if the payment was supposed to be made on the day when the banks were closed on account of holiday or strike, then also payment can be made by cash, and that particular loophole can be used by anybody for making payments exactly on a bank holiday. Nobody can say he has violated. But once again, these are not some things to be just looked at as loopholes. If somebody wants to really use them and show that excessive cash payments and too much of cash expenditure, a assessing officer is not going to just like that allow such person. They will definitely ask for more proofs on the real payment. That is why there is a three-way approach. There is a strict provision also, there is a loophole also, and there is a strict implementation also of not having the facility of exploiting the loopholes. So all the things ultimately in reality will come to what actually the SSC's intentions are. If he is really intending to hide certain payments in the disguise of cash payments, or make certain expenditure which he did not incur but shows just like that as if he has incurred, then those all things can be definitely caught. They can be investigated by the assessing officer if there is a scrutiny. That will be always there. That possibility is always there. We don't have to get into that. For us, it's all about theory. For us, it's all about provisions and rules which are there on black and white. Reality is completely different. As per theory, what it is it okay or not okay to pay more than 10,000 cash or not? That we have to observe. In these cases, when mentioned in Rule 6DD, it's okay to pay cash also. Same way, payment made to the agent who in turn is supposed to make payments in cash to purchase some goods or services, then also it is okay. Payment made by authorized dealer is also okay. Payment made to an employee after deducting TDS also is okay to be made more than 10,000 in cash if that employee is placed at a place which is not his normal place of duty for a period of more than 15 days, or is on a ship where he doesn't have any bank account. These are the exceptions to 40A3 contained in Rule 6DD. Now moving on to further disallowances, 40A7 and 40A9. There is nothing special to discuss about them. Simple point, logically also we can understand anything if it is unapproved, non-statutory, naturally amounts will be not deductible enough, whatever they are. Any unapproved gratuity fund if payment is made, naturally it will not be deductible because it is unapproved. Only approved funds will be having deduction. If the employer makes any contribution to approved funds, then it is okay. Unapproved gratuity funds or any other unapproved funds, any other things, not only just gratuity. Gratuity was mentioned only in 40A7, but if it is there for any other fund which is not an approved fund, that amount will be disallowed as per 40A9. So 40A7 is a specific disallowance only for gratuity fund. 40A9 is a general disallowance for any other fund which is non-statutory fund, which is not an approved fund, then amount will be disallowed. So there is no big deal in this. We can easily identify in the question. If it is given that it is approved or unapproved, we will allow the deduction only if it is approved. If it is clearly given that it is unapproved, then we will disallow it. If it is not given, you can write an assumption that it is approved and allow the deduction. In general, when there is a dilemma, give benefit to SSC. He is going to be our client, if at all in future. In exams, he is not going to give us anything, few marks only. But in future, if there is a dilemma, he is definitely going to be the person who is going to be our client who will give us money. So keep that in mind. In case of dilemma, in case there is a requirement of assumption, we cannot have wild assumptions. Though it is given as unapproved, or though it is clear from the text of the question that it is unapproved, still we will assume it is approved and give deduction. That will not be good. It depends upon case to case. In general, the questions in the examination will have more clarity because more areas kept open will give more scope for the students to have their own assumptions, and naturally the answers will be completely different from one student to another student. Valuation also becomes tough for the valuers. That is why, as much as possible in the exam conditions questions, they will try to give many details and leave less scope for assumptions. They try to do that, but still there will be some scope, some requirement. If it is there, we don't need to hesitate to make any reasonable assumptions. That is the reality of solving the questions. But of course, in this case, 40A7 and 40A9, both are just disallowances for unapproved gratuity fund, or for that matter, unapproved any other fund. Not allowed if employer, who is our SSC, contributed something on behalf of employees. He says that I have done so much of expenditure, I am contributing too much money to my unapproved funds on behalf of my employees. No problem, you can just contribute and enjoy that contribution later. But point is, you don't get deduction. That amount is not allowed. If this is not there, people will say that they themselves will form some fund and they will contribute to themselves. So people can do anything. Those things are not to be supported by the law. So hence, naturally, unapproved funds will not be eligible for deduction if any amount is contributed to them by the SSC. That's it. These are various disallowances in 40 series. So 40 small a, 40 capital A2, 40A3, 40A7 and 40A9. These are disallowances. 40B is about, you call it disallowance or allowance, whatever it is, but related to the partnership firms in relation to interest or remuneration to the partners by the partnership firm. That is 40B. Now moving on to another very important section, where under section 43B, certain deductions are allowed only on actual payment. This was referred to earlier also. These deductions, as mentioned in 43B, can be given only on actual payment. What are those conditions where 43B will be invoked? Means these following items are not allowed as deduction on accrual basis, they are allowed as deduction only on actual payment. What are those? First point, any sum payable by way of a tax, duty, cess, fee, whatever name called, under any law for the time being in force. So anything payable to government, naturally we can say. What are the name it is called? GST, payable but not paid, not allowed as deduction. If it is paid, then only. Any amount of tax, duty, cess, fee, by whatever name called, under any law for the time being in force. Are we talking about only central government? No. Municipal taxes payable? No, not allowed as deduction. Local taxes payable? Not allowed as deduction. Paid? Then allowed as deduction. So only when they are paid, then only they are allowed as deduction under 43B, if that amount of payment is supposed to be made to the government. So that is a point. For easy reference and remembrance, G also is similar, because railways also in India government only, at least now. Any sum payable to Indian Railways for use of railway assets is also allowable as deduction only if it is really paid. So if the SSC is using any of the railway assets and payment is supposed to be made to the Indian Railways, that amount has to be paid really, not on accrual basis. So A and G are government payments, we can call, whatever they are. A is a general provision, G is about Indian Railways, to which SC was supposed to pay some money. If he pays really, then only he can claim deduction. If he doesn't pay, he cannot claim deduction on accrual basis. So that is 43B. One area or one segment, we can say, payments to government and government authorities. And second categorization can be related to employee payments. Payments to employees. What type of payments? Any sum payable by SC as an employer by way of contribution to any provident fund or superannuation fund or gratuity fund, or for that matter any other fund for the welfare of employees. We know this already. This is the same thing once again repeated in 43B. If SSC says, I have contributed, I will contribute to the provident fund on behalf of employee, boss, when you contribute, then claim deduction. You cannot say, I will contribute, I will create a provision for contribution. No, nothing like that. Really, if employer has actually contributed to any provident fund or superannuation fund or gratuity fund or any other employee welfare fund, then only deduction can be claimed on payment basis. Same way, we already discussed this. Bonus or commission for services rendered payable to the employees only will be allowed as deduction on actual payment basis. Bonus or commission particularly. Don't bring your own provisions. Salaries, wages payable to the employees can be allowed as deduction even on accrual basis, no problem. But bonus or commission can be allowed as deduction only on payment basis. And in this employee segment, we can go to point F, where leave salary has to be paid to the employee. That also will be allowed as deduction if the employer has actually paid. That is what is earned leave of the employee, payable by employer, which we call popularly leave salary. If that is payable by the employer, only payable amount is not allowed as deduction. When it is really paid, then only it will be allowed as deduction. These are employee related points B, C and F. Then D and E are related to interest. Interest payments by SSE. To whom is the question. Almost everybody is covered here. Almost, other than the personal loans that SC takes from his own known contacts. Mostly if interest is payable on any loan or borrowing which is taken from any public financial institution or state finance corporation or state industrial corporation, industrial investment corporation or non-banking finance companies or any scheduled bank or even a cooperative bank, or everything is there. So if any interest is payable to a bank or a cooperative bank or even state finance corporation or any other public financial institution, then interest is allowed as deduction only on payment basis. That is also another point to be noted under 43B. So simple to understand and remember here, payments to government only allowed as deduction on payment basis. Payments to employees, except basic normal salaries and wages and allowances. Other than that, bonus, commission, etc., contribution to various funds or leave salary, all of them are allowed as deduction only on payment basis. Then third category is interest, payable to whom? If it is payable to any bank, scheduled bank or even a cooperative bank or even a state finance corporation or any other public financial institution, then that will be allowed as deduction only on payment basis. Even payable to NBFC, non-banking finance companies also, that also is allowed as deduction only on payment basis. That is why interest almost has a very broad coverage in this. Payments to government has a broad coverage in this. Payments to employees has not complete coverage. Wages, salaries, allowances can be allowed as deduction on accrual basis also. That's okay. But bonus, commission, etc. cannot be allowed as deduction on accrual basis. They have to be allowed as deduction only on payment basis. That is 43B, certain deductions to be allowed only on payment basis. Very, very important section. Questions can be asked, case-based questions can be asked also. But as usual, there will be one more doubt. Payment we are talking, okay. When the payments have to be done? When? These sums can be paid by the SSE before the due date for furnishing the return of income under section 139(1), which means 31st July or 30th September. So, if these payments are made before the due date for furnishing the return of income, that is okay. That is not a problem. That is considered as if it is paid only, and that will be allowed as deduction. So, the due date is not, once again, the due date according to the respective acts. The due date is in accordance with Income Tax Act, which is the due date for furnishing the return of income. That also has logic has to be applied. And CBDT has even issued a circular about this, though they have excluded employees' contribution from that circular. It is again a litigation issue. We'll keep that separately. Employees' contribution, if the employer has collected, that has to be deposited within the due date according with the respective act, is what CBDT still says. Till the next level Supreme Court gives any judgment on that, we cannot comment on that, but we can apply Delhi High Court judgment as we discussed earlier about employees' contribution. But as far as employers' contribution and every other section, every other provision contained in 43B is concerned, already it is very clear, the position is not having any grey area. When the payments have to be made regarding any of these things, all of them, when the payment has to be made, what is the due date? That is nothing but the due date for furnishing the return of income under 139(1), which is nothing but 31st July or 30th September. That is the point to be noted. And while discussing these provisions, I think we have just ignored or skipped one of the other small points here in 40BA. That is, any salary, remuneration or interest paid by AOP or BOI to its members is not deductible. Not deductible means not deductible, that's all. So there is nothing else to discuss on that. 40BA says, 40B allows interest and remuneration to partners as a reduction to the partnership firm. But party BA disallows any such interest or remuneration by BAOP or BOI to its members that is not deductible under 40 BA. Naturally, somebody will also ask a question or a doubt may come. Or what about sole proprietors? Sole proprietors, it will not be deductible anyway. Why? Because it is a fictional transaction. Sole proprietor is giving himself salary, he is giving himself interest on his own capital to himself. It doesn't make sense. That is already illogical to even treat that as an expenditure of the business, illogical to treat that as it is income of the SSC, because business and SSC are one and the same as far as Income Tax Act is concerned. And assessment is done for the SSC, not for the business. Hence, fictional payments, notional expenses like that will never be considered as expenses at all. That was clear from the concept itself. We don't need a provision for that. But as far as partnership firm is concerned, we had a provision for 40B. AOP BOI, doubt might come. That is why provision is there, 40BA, which said disallowed, simple, not at all allowed. Any interest or remuneration or salary, whatever name called, given by AOP or BOI to its members is disallowed. Dot. That was 40DA. So we have discussed about these disallowances in the sequence of 40 small a, 40 A2, capital A2, 40 capital A3, then exceptions to 40 A3 are Rule 6DD, then we have 40 A7 and 40 A9 also disallowances, then 40B and 40BA, you call them disallowances or allowances, that's okay. Then 43B is about allowance is there, but only on actual payment. That means also other side of the coin, if actual payment is not done, the sums mentioned in 43B are not allowed as deduction. Let us apply these conditions in some of these questions. Look at this example. Determine the amount of disallowance under the head of PGBP in this case. That is question number 1, whatever number that is. One question. Case-based questions like this can be expected. 4 marks questions, perfect possible. First situation, actually all are different cases. X Limited purchases raw material on credit from Y, and Y is holding 20% equity share capital in X Limited, which means what? Y is a related party to X Limited, related person according to 40A2. That is first of all clear, because Y is having substantial interest in X Limited. Amount of the bill is 42,000 rupees. Market value was 38,000. Means how much is excessive amount? Excessive amount is 4,000 rupees, which will be disallowed under 40A2. That is amount of disallowance under 40A2. 4,000 rupees definitely, because there is a related person to whom the company has made a payment in excess of what it is supposed to pay, which is clear from the question itself. Then, that is not over. The bill is paid in cash on the 15th June of previous year. In cash, that is another problem. Bill is paid means how much bill? 42,000 is paid to Y, whoever it is, doesn't matter. This is 48.3. 48.3 is not related to related persons, but that is excessive payment more than 10,000 rupees in cash, which is paid by X Limited. So what should be the amount of disallowance under 48.3? That is a point to be very importantly noted. 42,000 made in cash. Should we say that 42,000 is disallowed? Answer will be wrong. Why? Because already in that 42,000, 4,000 was disallowed under 48.2. How can you disallow same amount twice under 2 different sections? Doesn't make sense. So under 48.3, how much will be disallowed here? Naturally, remaining 38,000 will be disallowed, which means the total disallowance is same, 42,000, but are not under same section. So if the question says what is the disallowance under 48.3 for point A, answer is 38,000 only, because already 48.2 has disallowed 4,000 as a excessive payment to related person. That is why these type of questions are important and can be expected. We have to be careful in applying the provisions. 4,000 also, 42,000 also, if you disallow 46,000, how can you disallow when the payment is only 42,000? Doesn't make sense. Total disallowance can be only 42,000. In that, since already 4,000 is disallowed under 48.2, 48.3 will have a disallowance of 38,000. That is point number A or case A, first scenario. Second scenario or situation, A Limited purchased goods on credit from B Limited on 10th of April for 12,000 rupees and on 16th of April for 15,000 rupees, total payment 27,000 is made in cash on 1st May of the previous year. See, it does not matter whether this payment is related to one invoice or multiple invoices. We do not bother about the purchases. We bother about payment. Payment is made how much? 27,000, which is made in cash. So naturally, how much will be disallowed? Entire 27,000 will be automatically disallowed. That's all. Because it is more than 10,000. Don't say 17,000 is disallowed. That will be mistake. Entire amount will be disallowed. That 10,000 is not for calculation. That is only condition. The moment the amount of payment exceeds 10,000, entire amount is disallowed. So how much is the answer here? How much is the amount of disallowance? In this case, entire 27,000 under 48.3. CBIT says B Limited purchased goods on credit from Y Limited on whatever date, which is 32,000, for which pays by a bearer check. Bearer check, no, not allowed. So this entire 32,000 is disallowed. Disallowed. Bearer check is not allowed. Account pay check only is allowed. Same way. D point says S Limited purchases from T Limited for 32,000, where the payment made by crossed check. No, this is also not allowed. Bearer check not allowed, crossed check not allowed, underco check not allowed. All those things are not going to be working. Only one thing, what the law says, that is only allowed. That is account pay check. Any other check is not allowed. So, how much is the amount of disallowance here under 48.3 once again? Is 32,000. That's all. B, C, D have fully disallowance. A also has fully disallowance, but not under same section, under two different sections. That was one of the examples from past questions. Another example, let us see. Examine with reasons the allowability of the following expenses under the Income Tax Act while computing income of from the business or profession for the assessment year 2021 as usual. Let us see one by one. Simply, allowability means what? Allowed, disallowed, allowed, disallowed. With reasons you have to write. If you just say allowed, disallowed, you will get only less marks for that, negligible marks. You have to write reasons for that, with which only you will get full marks. Now look at first point. Provision made. See, first of all, the word provision itself means it is not allowed. But let us complete the sentence. Provision made on the basis of actuarial valuation for a payment of gratuity of 5 lakhs. However, no payment on account of gratuity was made before the due date of filing the return. When no payment is made before filing the due date, before the due date for filing the return of income, naturally nothing will be allowed as deduction. So this entire amount of 5 lakhs is what? Disallowed. This is disallowed. Second, purchase of oil seeds 50,000 rupees in cash from a farmer on a banking day. From a farmer purchasing oil seeds, cash do not matter. Rule 6DD exception applies. That means second case, it is allowed as deduction. Third case, tax on non-monetary perquisite provided to an employee 20,000 rupees is disallowed. Why? Because the same was already given as exemption to the employee under the head of salaries under 1010 CC. So third point is disallowed. This is disallowed. First one is disallowed. Second one is allowed. Then fourth point, payment of 50,000 rupees by credit card. Credit card, of course, allowed, no problem. There is no issue with credit card. It is allowed as deduction. Fifth point, salary payment of 2 lakhs outside India by a company without deduction of tax, 100% disallowed. So fully disallowed. That means entire 2 lakhs will be disallowed because it is paid outside India without TDS. 40 small a. Each of them has a provision. First one is provision. That is also 40 small a. Provisions and reserves are not allowed as deduction. Second one, rule 6DD. That is why it is allowed as deduction. Third one, it is not allowed as deduction once again according to 40 small a. Fourth one, rule 6DD. It is banking channel, no problem. So that is the exception. Or 48.3 also said banking channels are okay. Credit card is banking channel. Again, fifth point is once again 40 small a. Salary made paid outside India without TDS, not allowed as deduction. Fully 100% is allowed. Then sixth point, payment made in cash 30,000 rupees to a transporter on in a day for carriage of goods. See, for transporters the limit of 48.3 is not 10,000, it becomes 35,000. So 30,000 is not a problem. That means it is allowed as deduction. So these are the final answers. First one is disallowed, second one allowed, third one disallowed, fourth one allowed, fifth one disallowed, again sixth one allowed. According to the respective provisions, not according to our whims and fancies. We have to rewrite the respective provisions, then only we'll get full marks for that. Then, let us look at another similar question like this. These type of questions can very well be expected. They were given in exams quite frequently earlier. So, same thing. Examine with the reasons for the following subdivisions whether the following statements are true or false, having regard to the provisions of Income Tax Act. So, true or false, you have to write. First point. For a dealer in shares and securities, STT, security transaction tax paid in recognized stock exchange is permissible business expenditure. True. It is allowed as deduction. Very clear. Under 36. Where a person follows mercantile system of accounting, an expenditure of 25,000 rupees has been allowed on accrual basis, and in a latter year, in respect of the said expenditure, SC makes a payment of 25,000 rupees through a check crossed as and co. So, disallowance of 25,000 under 48(3) can be made in the year of payment. True or false? Looks like true, right? No. Answer is false. Why? That is not disallowance, sir. The question was telling there will be 25,000 disallowance. No, it is not a disallowance. It is taxability. The same 25,000 becomes taxable in the year of payment. That is deemed to be the income of the SSC in the year of payment, because it is made by any mode other than account to pay check. Underco check is not account to pay check. That is why it cannot be called as it is disallowed. It is actually taxable. Both are not same. Effect may be same. Because effect is same, I will take it same. No. So that statement is false. Statement is false. Disallowance cannot be made. It will be deemed to be the income of the SSC in that year of payment, when already an expenditure of same amount has been claimed as deduction earlier on accrual basis. So, statement is false in that point number 2. Then point number 3 is saying that it is mandatory to provide depreciation under section 32 while computing the income under the head PGBP. Absolutely true. It is mandatory. Then point number 4. Mediclaim premium paid to GIC by Mr. Lokesh by a draft is a deductible expenditure under section 36. True, of course, assuming that a draft is an account pay draft. So usually the draft will be automatically account pay. There will not be any bearer drafts and all. Because if you say it is a bearer draft, that is equivalent to currency note. It cannot be issued by banks. That is why draft will be naturally account pay draft only. That is why it is true. Then, under section 35 DDA, amortization of expenditure incurred under eligible voluntary retirement scheme at the time of retirement alone can be done. Amortization can it be done at the time of retirement? No, it is not at the time of retirement. It can be done only in the year of payment, and that too not in the same year, in 5 equal installments starting from the year of payment. So it is not about retirement which is important. What matters is payment under section 35 DDA. That is another situation. So that statement is false. Sixth statement says an existing SSC engaged in trading activities, can claim additional depreciation under section 32(1)(2)(a) in respect of new plant acquired and installed in the trading concern, where the increase in value of such plant is as compared to the approved base year is more than 10%. All nonsense. When it is a trading company, trading organization, no additional depreciation, simply speaking, not possible. Because additional depreciation is only available for manufacturing organizations but not for trading organizations. So that statement is also false. These are the answers. With the explanations, you have to write them in the exam. Then full marks can be awarded according to the presentation that we make, and reference to the appropriate sections will definitely also get better marks. That is about another question applying various provisions of this head of income PGBP. Now let us apply one more point of 43B related to payments. Expenditure allowed as reduction only on payment basis, particularly interest related expenditure. Read this question carefully. Hari is an individual carrying on, okay, whatever. Business of purchase and sale of agricultural commodities like paddy, wheat, etc. He borrowed loans from AP Straight Finance Corporation and also Indian Bank and has not paid interest as detailed as under So he has not paid interest, and APSFC or Indian Bank both are supposed to be paid in order to claim deduction. So what he has done? He did not pay this interest, but this much interest was payable, 15 lakhs and 30 lakhs. Both APSFC and Indian Bank, while restructuring the loan facilities of Hari during the year 1920, converted the above interest payable by Hari to them as loan repayable in 60 equal installments. So what they have done, interest capitalized. This 15 lakhs is now treated as a fresh loan, and now this 30 lakhs is treated as a fresh loan, which is repayable in 60 installments. So the first point is, can such restructuring be considered as if it is payment? Answer is no. Restructuring is not payment. Payment is really payment. Just by capitalizing that interest, just by adding it to the original loan amount, that does not make it a payment. First point. Second point, actually how much is paid during the previous year? He paid 5 installments to APSFC, 3 installments to Indian Bank. That's what actually he has paid. But what he is saying, 45 lakhs is claiming as interest expenditure while computing the income from the business of purchase and sale of agricultural commodities. See, some people will once again think, this agricultural income now, it is exempt now. Baba, he is not doing any agriculture. He is in the business of purchase and sale of agricultural commodities. He is doing trading, not agriculture. So, it is a naturally taxable item. That's fine. It is not our main question here. Main question is whether his claim is valid or not to claim entire 45 lakhs as deduction. Can he do that? Answer is no. He cannot do that because 45 lakhs he did not pay. Restructuring of a interest and capitalizing it as if it is a loan is not called as payment. How much he has really paid, that only will be allowed as deduction. That you have to calculate. So let us calculate that one by one. Let us say 15 lakhs loan from this APSFC should be paid in how many installments ideally? 60 installments. But how many installments he has paid? 5 installments only he has paid, which means how much will be allowed as deduction? 15 lakhs divided by 60 into 5. 1,25,000 only is allowed as deduction in that, which is the real payment. That only will be allowed as deduction, unlike what he has claimed. Same way, the loan which is interest which is payable to Indian Bank, 30 lakhs. 30 lakhs divided by 60, that is okay, 60 installments. But how many he paid actually? He paid only 3 installments to Indian Bank, 5 installments to SFC, 3 to Indian Bank. So into 3, that will come to how much? 30 lakhs by 60 into 3. That means 1,50,000 is the only amount that can be claimed as deduction by Mr. Hari. Total amount of deduction how much he can claim is only 2,75,000, not 45 lakhs. Conversion of interest into loan is not called as payment. Payment means really payment. Really payment how much he has made? 275,000 he has made. Naturally to that extent only he can claim as deduction. Of course, under which section this is all? 43B, where certain amounts are allowed as deduction on actual payment only. That is 43B. Prior to that, disallowances under 40 capital A series, A2, A3, A7, A9, those were all discussed already. And 40 small a was already discussed. 40B is also a very important section that is related to interest or remuneration payable by a partnership firm to its partners, allowed as deduction subject to the conditions mentioned in 40 small b. These are various aspects related to PGBP head of income. With that we can say the provisions, all of them which are required for computing PGBP are done, except one or two small sideline items which we will discuss anyway later. Remaining provisions on PGBP are mostly procedural in nature, not related to computation of PGBP. All the provisions which will be helpful for us in computation of PGBP we have already discussed. So this can conclude the core provisions of this head of income which can be used for solving the problems under this head of income PGBP. We will do those solving of problems also in the upcoming sessions. After which we will continue the discussion with some more residual small topics, mostly procedural but important from exam point of view. Those points also we'll discuss in the next sessions. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.